Have you ever wondered how a seemingly ordinary man can turn into one of history's most notorious villains? Today, we delve into the enigmatic life of one such man, Pol Pot, a figure whose name is etched into the annals of Cambodia's history with a chilling permanence. Pol Pot, a name that resonates with a chilling echo in the hearts of many, was a man whose life and actions have significantly shaped the course of Cambodia's history. His regime, steeped in controversy and marred by actions of unimaginable severity, has left an indelible mark on this Southeast Asian nation. The story of Pol Pot is not just a tale of a man, but a narrative of power, ideology, and the devastating effects they can have when taken to extremes. It's a tale that compels us to question the very nature of humanity itself. To understand the man behind the atrocities, we need to delve into the early life of Pol Pot. Pol Pot, born Saloth Sar, didn't start as a dictator. Born in the small farming village of Prek Spov, Cambodia, in the year 1925, he was the eighth of 9 children in a moderately well-to-do family. His early life was far removed from the brutal regime he would later establish. As a young boy, Saloth Sar was sent to live with his brother in Phnom Penh, the Cambodian capital, where he was exposed to a whole new world, one that was far from his humble rural beginnings. He received an education at the elite French Lycée Sisowath school, which was a privilege that few Cambodians of his time had. It was during these impressionable years that he was introduced to the politics and ideologies that would later shape his rule. However, his academic performance was less than stellar, and he failed to secure a place in higher education. This led him to a training school in the city, where he studied carpentry. It was here that his political consciousness truly began to take form. Saloth Sar became involved with the French Communist Party, and the seeds of his radical ideology started to germinate. In the early 1950s, he received a scholarship to study in Paris. His time in France was transformative, as he became more deeply involved in communist ideology, particularly the radical ideas of Mao Zedong. He returned to Cambodia not as Saloth Sar, but as Pol Pot, a name that would soon echo with infamy. His transformation from a simple rural boy to a radical revolutionary was not an overnight change. It was a gradual process, shaped by his education, experiences, and the political influences he encountered throughout his life. His journey was marked by a deep dissatisfaction with the status quo and a burning desire to radically transform society. But how did this transformation occur? What were the influences that shaped Pol Pot? These questions will lead us further into the enigma of Pol Pot as we delve deeper into his rise to power in the next scene. Pol Pot's rise to power was not an overnight event. It was a slow-burning fire, fueled by a political climate that was ripe for exploitation. Cambodia, in the mid-20th century, was a nation in flux, struggling to find its footing after gaining independence from France in 1953. The monarchy under King Norodom Sihanouk was unstable, and the king's policies were often contradictory, leaving the population discontent and yearning for change. In this atmosphere of uncertainty and discontent, Pol Pot saw an opportunity. But who was Pol Pot during these times? A former schoolteacher turned revolutionary, Pol Pot, born as Saloth Sar, was a man of conviction and a charismatic leader who knew how to seize an opportunity. He was deeply influenced by Marxism and dreamed of creating a classless society, a utopia where everyone was equal. Pol Pot's vision resonated with many Cambodians, especially the disenfranchised rural population. He capitalized on this discontent, using it as a springboard to launch the Communist Party of Kampuchea, better known as the Khmer Rouge. The Khmer Rouge began as a small, marginalized group, but under Pol Pot's leadership, it steadily grew in size and influence. Pol Pot's rise was further facilitated by King Sihanouk's decision to align himself with the Khmer Rouge in the early 1970s. The king's endorsement legitimized the Khmer Rouge in the eyes of many Cambodians, and their ranks swelled. Pol Pot, now at the helm of a significant revolutionary force, was ready to make his move. The Khmer Rouge, under Pol Pot's leadership, gradually gained control over large parts of the Cambodian countryside. By 1975, they were ready to seize the capital, Phnom Penh, marking the beginning of Pol Pot's brutal regime. And so, the stage was set for one of the darkest chapters in human history. A chapter where the dreams of a utopia would quickly dissolve into a nightmare of unimaginable proportions. A chapter where Pol Pot would leave an indelible mark on the pages of history. In 1975, Pol Pot's regime took over. The reign of terror had begun. This was the year when Cambodia fell under the iron grip of the Khmer Rouge, led by the enigmatic and ruthless Pol Pot. This regime, under the guise of an agrarian socialist revolution, sought to transform Cambodia into a self-sufficient, classless society. However, this was far from the utopia it claimed to be. The regime implemented policies that were nothing short of disastrous and horrifying. One such policy was forced labor. The Khmer Rouge drove millions of people from their homes in the cities to toil in the countryside. These people, known as the New People, were forced to work in collective farms and labor camps. They worked long hours, often without adequate food or medical care, leading to widespread malnutrition and disease. The New People were also subjected to brutal punishments and executions for perceived slights against the regime. The regime also carried out purges, targeting anyone they deemed a threat to their rule. This included intellectuals, professionals, and even those who simply wore glasses, as this was seen as a sign of intellectualism. The purges were brutal and indiscriminate, with entire families often being executed to prevent potential revenge attacks in the future. Perhaps the most infamous aspect of Pol Pot's reign was the killing fields. These were sites across Cambodia where mass executions took place. People were often bludgeoned to death to save bullets, and their bodies dumped into mass graves. It's estimated that nearly 2 million people, or 1/4 of Cambodia's population, perished in these killing fields. The impact of these policies on the population was devastating. The country was ravaged, its people living in constant fear and suffering. Families were torn apart, communities destroyed, and the fabric of Cambodian society was irrevocably altered. The regime's policies also had a profound impact on the country's economy. The focus on agriculture at the expense of industry led to economic collapse. Infrastructure crumbled, and the country became one of the poorest in the world. The human cost of Pol Pot's reign is impossible to quantify. The scars of this period are etched deeply into the psyche of the country. Even today, many Cambodians still bear the physical and emotional wounds inflicted during this time. The horror that was Pol Pot's regime came to an end in 1979, but the scars remain. The reign of terror had ended, but the shadow of Pol Pot still looms large over Cambodia. The country continues to grapple with the legacy of this dark period in its history, a testament to the enduring impact of Pol Pot's reign of terror. The reign of terror ended, but the nightmare was far from over. With the Vietnamese invasion of Cambodia in late 1978, Pol Pot's gruesome reign began to crumble. The Khmer Rouge regime, once an iron fist, was now losing its grip. The once invincible Pol Pot was on the run, fleeing into the jungle, his dream of an agrarian utopia shattered. In the dense forests along the Thai border, Pol Pot led a shadowy existence. He was no longer a dictator but a fugitive, hiding from the world that sought justice for his monstrous crimes. Yet even in his seclusion, his presence was a chilling reminder of the terror that once gripped Cambodia. His life in hiding was shrouded in mystery until his death in April 1998, reportedly due to heart failure. But death did not absolve Pol Pot of his sins. The world demanded justice, and the hunt for his accomplices began. In the years that followed, the United Nations and Cambodia set up the Extraordinary Chambers in the Courts of Cambodia, or ECCC. This special court was tasked with bringing the remaining Khmer Rouge officials to justice. The trials were long and arduous, but they were a crucial step towards healing the wounds of the past. The court's verdicts brought some solace to the survivors, but the scars of Pol Pot's reign ran deep. The aftermath of his brutal regime was a country in ruins. Millions had perished, and those who survived were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. Cambodia was a nation traumatized, its people haunted by memories of the horrors they had endured. Yet in the face of such adversity, the Cambodian spirit proved resilient. The survivors began the painstaking task of rebuilding their lives and their country. Slowly but surely, Cambodia began to heal. The trials provided a sense of closure, and the people found strength in unity. They vowed never to forget, but also never to let the past define their future. The aftermath of Pol Pot's regime also sparked a global conversation about human rights and genocide. His reign of terror served as a grim reminder of the depths to which humanity can sink. It underscored the importance of vigilance, of never taking our rights and freedoms for granted. It reminded us that the cost of silence in the face of injustice is far too high. Today, Cambodia continues to grapple with the legacy of Pol Pot. The physical scars may have healed, but the psychological wounds still linger. The memories of the Khmer Rouge era are a painful part of the national consciousness, a dark chapter in the country's history that cannot be erased. Pol Pot may be gone, but his shadow still looms over Cambodia. His reign of terror is a stark reminder of the destructive power of unchecked authority and the devastating consequences of ideological extremism. The story of Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge is not just a tale of one man's descent into madness, but a lesson for all of humanity. A lesson we must never forget. Pol Pot's legacy is a stark reminder of the depths humanity can sink to. His reign, marked by a brutal and ruthless pursuit of a utopian society, resulted in the death and suffering of millions of innocent lives. In our exploration of Pol Pot's life and reign, we've traced his journey from a simple, rural upbringing to his rise to power as the leader of the Khmer Rouge. We've delved into the darkness of his reign of terror, where he attempted to forcefully mold Cambodia into an agrarian society, leading to what is now known as the Cambodian Genocide. His fall from power, while bringing an end to the immediate horror, left a country grappling with the aftermath of a devastated society and economy. The scars of his regime are still visible today in the form of mass graves, shattered families, and a generation lost to violence and starvation. But what lessons can we draw from this dark chapter in history? Firstly, it underscores the importance of vigilance against the rise of extremist ideologies. Pol Pot's radical vision for a classless, agrarian society blinded him to the immense human cost of his actions. Secondly, it serves as a vivid reminder of the value of human rights and the rule of law. The blatant disregard for these principles under Pol Pot's rule led to unspeakable atrocities that must never be repeated. Finally, it emphasizes the crucial role of education and awareness. By understanding the past, we can better guard against the repetition of such horrific events. Even though the horrors of Pol Pot's regime are uncomfortable to remember, forgetting them would be a disservice to the victims and a risk to our future. The legacy of Pol Pot is not one to celebrate, but one to remember and learn from. It's a sobering testament to the potential destructiveness of unchecked power and radical ideologies. It's crucial to remember and learn from the past, to prevent such atrocities from happening in the future. This is Historical Leaders Unveiled, signing off.